It has become something of a tradition at the Great Telco Debate to feature an onstage interview with a special guest who can provide an alternate take on our industry, coming from a slightly different angle. It's really, really useful because I think we assume too much within the industry, in the telecoms industry. So we are going to have a little fireside chat now, and then we will do our final session. So could you first of all please join me in welcoming our special guest, who is Colin Lee of Jaguar Land Rover, JLR, and is also a board member of the 5GAA, the 5G Automotive Association. Yep. Colin, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Colin, we met fairly recently at a 5GAA event in Berlin. I think everyone here probably knows Jaguar Land Rover, especially this week. There's a lot of attention in the press. But it's a well-established set of family of brands. Mm-hmm. Maybe not everyone is as familiar with 5GAA. Can you just give us a quick précis of what 5GAA is and what it sets out to achieve?
Sure. So thank you for having me here, by the way. It's been great listening to what's been the talks and debates. So 5GAA, about 7 years ago, the OEMs really wanted to start expanding into the communication world, but they really were doing it, but doing it perhaps not as good as perhaps they wanted to, because they didn't know enough about communication. Equally, you had the telcos at that point wasn't that interested in the automotive world because it hadn't really started, so therefore they had other things on their plate. So 5GAA was pulled together to try and join the dots between the telco industry and the automotive industry. And I have to say, the first 2 years, we're literally talking chalk and cheese. 1 minute we didn't understand what the problems were with the telco side, and they didn't understand what we were doing on the OEM side. But I can say, over the years we've been doing this, there has been a lot of understanding, and we've even expanded to do things like the roadside equipment as well. We've started to talk to those, and we're expanded even further now into satellite and all that kind of stuff. So it's been quite exciting.
Now, when you talk about OEMs, it probably means something different to us in the telecoms industry. What do you mean by OEMs?
They are basically the Jaguar Land Rovers, the car manufacturers, OEMs.
Great, okay. And as you say, it was chalk and cheese to begin with, perhaps, but ever since car phones first appeared in a really rudimentary form factors, there's been this relationship with cars and the automotive sector. Things are getting better, but what would you say the relationship is at the moment between these two industries?
Good, much better than it's been, but the biggest problem I think that was there at the beginning was we constantly kept on saying we want always connected environment. The problem we found when we were talking to the telco industries was they talk about connectivity as per 1,000 circa in terms of their customer base, but of course we're on trunk roads between the two, right? So whatever we're doing is different for what they were doing. Very similar back in the DAB world when we had traffic going over DAB, where they were concentrating on big cities and that, but they weren't concentrating on the cars going between the two. So it's got better, and what's lovely about this is we don't have a direct 3GPP connection from an OEM, but of course they do and other people do, and the understanding that we've given them are now starting to come out to fruition on 3GPP. So the things that they're asking for now is actually what we need on the cars.
Well, this is really interesting, isn't it? Because you do have that relationship with the Telecom Standards Organisation, 3GPP, and there is this, as I said, this relationship there. And one of the developments that really impressed me recently was the V2X, vehicle to everything. Can you give us a little background as to what V2X is and what it actually means for you in the automotive industry?
Well, first of all, I've been doing V2X for about 18 years. So V2X is a vehicle to anything. The idea is that if you can have a vehicle that's able to connect to another vehicle and look inside of what it's doing, so all of its little things it's moving around, like when they press the brake, we know it when it's being pressed. When they turn the lights on, we know when it's turned on. So if they're braking, we know they're going to brake. We know they're braking. Or if we're taking the foot off the accelerator, we know they've done that. So that's the type of thing you can do when you communicate between two cars. Then between the car and the infrastructure, traffic lights, road gantries, roadworks, all those type of things. So we know when we're going over the hill, for example, we know that there's a traffic jam. Can't see it before you go, because we know there's a red light. We've picked it up. Then, of course, we've got vehicle to network, which is where we go through the LTE at the moment. Then we've also got vehicle to people. So we can detect, for example, if there's a bus and they've come out the front door and they decide to go in front of the bus, we know that they're walking through in front of the bus. So therefore, we can take action earlier not to cause trouble there. And when I say everything, there's stuff we've not even spoken about. There's vehicle to grid, there's vehicle to all kinds of things that we can do in the future as well. And vehicle to network to vehicle is another one, where you're going through the network into a vehicle. So there's lots.
Now, being in this industry for quite a few years, every time we have a new cellular standard, a new generation, we see lists of use cases and industries that are going to be the beneficiaries, and how telcos can attract revenue from these industries thanks to this latest generation of technology. And we've seen it from generation to generation to generation. So when 5G was appearing, up at the top of the list there, near the top was automotive. It was there. It was a dead cert use case. And we're going to be talking about 6G, and that already we're seeing that's a definite use case. There's going to be a great source of revenue there for the telcos. But what is the reality? Automotive has always wanted to be one of these killer apps of 5G. But what's the actual reality? And are you banging on the telcos' doors and saying, "Hey, we need 5G," and that's not enough. We can't wait for 6G.
Good question. I mean, when we were looking into 5G, we were struggling to justify it. Because, to be honest, 4G does pretty much everything we want to do today. And when we look to the future, it seems to do everything we want to do in the future to a certain degree. But knowing that we had to go that direction, especially what happened with 3G when it disappeared, so we had no choice but go forward, but we didn't really have a justifiable reason to do it. Having said that, as you start going through the Gs, you end up having the extra capability with the V2X type, for example, like the battery saving capability, the detecting pedestrians, and having the capability of talking to pedestrians, adding non-terrestrial networks, and that's where I think the longer term mindset is in terms of going through the Gs. If you took it today on the stuff we have in the cars today, we don't necessarily need 5G. But as you start moving through the capabilities of what you're going to do in the future, that's where we get excited.
And you mentioned non-terrestrial networks. Is this a real request from you? Is this something you really see value in?
We see value in. Well, we did some work on some geo technology way back and found that actually it wasn't very good for the car, because they were going up the hill and we're losing connection. They're going down the hill. But as we start going to Leo, it opens up the world. So, and the thing is, we're looking for always connected, right? So, and it was interesting listening to the last session, because we have a multiplexer coming into our car where we've got all of the various different things like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. We have UU, 4G in this case today. We also have PC5, which would be the kind of like V2X that would be done there, and possibly in the future we'll have NTN. But ultimately, what happens, we want to get all that information coming in, but it has to go into the car in the same way. And so we don't really mind where it comes from, as long as we don't not spend a load of money doing it. And also we don't need a lot. Some things like updating the car can be done via Wi-Fi. It could be done via obviously LTE or anything like that. But at the same time, we're trying to utilize all of the capabilities out there to improve our our customer service, really.
All this information, you're talking about the transfer of information, it brings us to data. Let's talk data, because I remember when I started getting really interested in all this, it was about 7-8 years ago. I've had to write some of this down and do some research, because it was a few years ago. And Intel were doing some work on this, and they were putting out a lot of releases and white papers saying, in-car data collection would amount to 4 terabytes of data a day. And it's just about 7-8 years ago. It's a huge number, and it's all this data is the new oil, and it's massive. And then I think quite recently it was Cruise in San Francisco who reported on their trials saying only 1% of all this collected data from all our sensors in the car is actually really relevant to us and really, really useful. So when we talk about cars and the evolution of cars and getting to more autonomous ways of travelling. You think of all the sensors. There's a huge amount of data in the car. We're not surely transferring all that data at all times.
I couldn't possibly imagine us doing that amount of data. Well, I mean, obviously, if you connected everything to everything and had all of the sensors sharing again with everyone, and also having loads of videos and loads of stuff like that, that might be possible you get to that level. But we can't process that kind of work inside the car. I mean, we have several networks in the car which have certain things, but the worst thing we can have is when you press a brake and we're waiting for the network to flush out before the brakes are actually applied. So the worst thing we can do is we have to put a cap on the amount of data coming in to make sure that we don't interfere with the car. And if we're finding the data that's coming in is changing, by the way, we'll never get to that stage, we would definitely throttle back on anything coming in. So I can't see us getting to that point, if you see what I mean. Certainly not in the short term, for sure.
Well, when we spoke at the Berlin event you were hosting, you and I spoke about path data, this concept of path data for when the car's actually moving along. This was great. This was new, and this sounded really interesting. Can you explain what you mean by path data? Because this really helps narrow down what sort of shared data we're talking about.
So when you've got an autonomous car, the first thing you've got to do is calculate your path or where you're going to go. So you have your sensors, you have a map in your brain, and you basically drive down that road. Now, if it's the same road, fine, the path is the same. But if you come across a roadworks, the car has to calculate a path of how it's going to get around that roadworks, and it does that very slowly. So clearly, and also it could be sharing LiDAR data, that's possible, but the amount of time to process LiDAR data when you're sending it to the car behind would be far too long. So it's much quicker to look at a path plan that somebody else has done and work on that and build on that. And what you'll see is a load of lines going over the same path, but eventually there'll be a sweet spot where everyone just keeps on using that sweet spot. And then the next day, when they go to head and try and use that same path, but the roadworks have moved, that first car will start doing another path, which will then pass us on. So what we do is try and simplify rather than do it. Now, obviously, when we get back home, we could possibly do all of this and send it through Wi-Fi to update a big area. And if we feel, the maps and so on, and if we feel that we need to do it immediately because of whatever reason, then we could do it immediately, but it wouldn't be all the time.
Which brings us on to a quite significant question, which is who pays for all of this? Because I can see the telcos, and have for years, looked at this as a great revenue opportunity. I can see maybe the OEMs thinking this is another cost on the sheet, or the cost of creating of a car. Do we sell these services to drivers as subscriptions? What do we, the public, who will be buying these vehicles, how are we even aware of what might be coming here? I still think there's a disconnect as to who finances all of this.
Well, we have actually got 2 SIM cards in our car. One, it's what we use to things like diagnostics, making sure we understand the car's running right, making sure that we can update the car in terms of software over the air and all that kind of stuff. But then they've got a customer side which might want to put maps on it and so on for their navigation. But most of the time, the customers don't put a SIM card in. They just use their mobile phones, and quite often they use Apple Play or CarPlay or that kind of thing because they don't particularly want to pay. So there is a problem here because we've got some great ideas that we'd love to do, but putting together a business plan that makes sense, it is not there yet. We're getting there, but we're not there yet. I mean, I'll put the question to the audience, would you pay £1,000 extra when you get your car to get the features that we want to give to you? The chances are you won't, especially if you know you can get it for 79p on here, right? You know what I'm saying? So, but the difference is once we do have that data in the car, we can do a lot more. Like I said, when we go over that hill, we know there's traffic behind it. We know there's crowds of people coming out from a rugby game before we go over that hill. Now, you would buy a car and say, well, we're paying for the safety capability of that car. But what we're trying to do is build on that safety, but also do things like information, other things like payment capabilities. So that wouldn't it be great that you'll go into Isle of Wight and you don't have to worry about the ferry, it's all been dealt with, you just go on, don't even have to do a ticket, it's all dealt with. But unfortunately, for us to do that, we have to have connectivity in the car and somebody has to pay for it. So yeah, we do have challenges, and it's not just JLR, it's all OEMs have challenges. And some OEMs have made big steps, others are very cautious and just waiting to see what the market is doing. And the other thing, of course, is the market penetration rate. So it's easy to do something on a cellular base because it's already there. Cars have had cellular in their cars since about 2018 because of eCall. It was mandated. But then to expand on that, it's been difficult to know how to really build on it. But we do it because our customers want it, so we do it. But so we have to balance up the costs.
Well, Colin's going to be staying with us at the end of the event, so any questions for Colin, please find Colin later in the networking area, and Colin said he's happy to talk to any of you. But I've got one final question I'd like to leave you with. We're about to go into a session that's looking at the next generation of cellular technology. We think, as an industry, what we want. Maybe not the same thing, but various aspects of the industry has its own ideas. What do you want as the automotive industry from telecoms moving forward? What can we do that's going to help you?
There's only one thing we want: always connected. I don't care how you do it, always connected. Once you've got always connected, it makes it a lot easier to sell a service. You know, for example, if we did wildfire and we could direct you around it, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? But if you're not in service, it just doesn't work. So we are constantly switching between various different levels, and we don't always get it right. But if the telco industry can focus on how we get always connected, that would make my life a lot easier. That's all I can say. The rest of it will follow.
Fantastic. Well, Colin, thank you very much indeed for talking with us at the Great Telco Debate. Please, a round of applause for Colin.
Thank you.